and the time is 4 a.m. Ghana time. So wherever you are, do the calculation to suit your location. We also meet here Mondays, Thursdays, and Fridays for our Zion hour and time with the Word of God, respectively. And the time is 4 p.m. Ghana time. So you do the calculation to suit your location. So today, I wouldn't waste much of our time. We are going to be discussing the topic grief. We all, one way or the other, grieve when we have a lost one or when we have lost something very valuable to us. And with us to do this discussion is no other person than our own Dr. Attram. He's right here with us and he is going to take us through this topic for discussion. Put your questions and contributions, your concerns, whatsoever together, and make sure you put them across when the time comes. Dr. Trump, you are
Hi.
warmly welcome to today's.
Thank you. Thank you. Good evening, children of God.
Good evening, Dr. Trump.
Today, as our hosts has stated rightly, we want to discuss grief and loss. Grief and loss. They complement each other. The topic complements each other. We grieve when we lose something. In times of loss, we grieve. And so we want to tackle grief that comes out of a loss. But let me ask this question. What is grief? Grief is a natural response to losing someone or something that is important to you. When you lose someone or you lose something, the response may be that you feel a variety of emotions, like you become sad or you become lonely. And you might experience it for a number of different reasons. Therefore, people have different reasons for grieving over a loss. Otherwise, somebody may lose something and will just forget about it and will not even pay attention to it. But in most cases, we have very good reasons to grieve over a loss. Maybe you've lost a loved one through death. Maybe a very good relationship that you cherished has ended. Maybe a job that gives you income, you've lost it. There are other life changes like chronic illness or a move to a new home, and these can also lead to grief. So, why do we study grief or bereavement? We study grief or bereavement because many people who grieve feel stuck in their grieving. They get to a point and they are stuck. They don't know how to go further. It doesn't follow any timelines or schedules. It just happens. And one thing we must note is that grief is very personal. It's very personal. Everyone grieves differently. But there are some commonalities in the stages and the order of feelings experienced during a grief. It is not unusual or wrong to cry or become angry or to withdraw, isolate yourself or feel empty, because if you understand your emotions and you can take care of yourself and seek support, you can be treated. So grief is a disease, psychological disease. We cannot explain grief without talking about the stages of grief. Various psychologists and psychiatrists have given varied stages of grief, depending on how their patients manifest their grief to them. But there is an important psychologist known as Kubler-Ross, and another one called Worden. He is from Boston in Massachusetts, in USA. They work at the University of Massachusetts General Hospital, and they see a lot of patients who come in with grief problems. Grief becomes a problem or disorder when it is a complicated type of grief, which we may look at it later on, complicated, or it becomes a problem if the person grieving cannot resolve it. So based on these things, these psychiatrists and psychologists have various stages of grief that they talk about. Because when one is grieving, feelings may happen in phases as some comes to terms and loss. We cannot control the process, but it's helpful to know the reasons behind someone's feelings. All people experience grief differently. The way a person experiences grief may be different from another person. And it is important that we note that if we want to work to help people who are grieving. Though it is no longer considered the ideal way to think about grief, we should remember it very seriously that people grieve differently. Grief takes place in different stages, and many psychologists have preferred various stages, like I earlier on stated. But today I'm going to look at Kubler-Ross's 7-stage grief, 7 stage of grief. According to Kubler-Ross, when somebody experiences loss, you remember we have stated that the topic complements each other. Loss, grieving comes out of a loss. So when somebody experiences loss, the first thing that happens to that person is shock. The person gets shocked. And it is a state of disbelief, and the person gets some numb feelings, palpitations, anxiety, dizziness, and so that person gets shocked. Upon hearing the loss of a loved one, a person enters into a state of shock, serious shock. For example, someone may faint or become even nauseous.
Okay.
Some of them even become unconscious, like you rightly said, unconscious. Some of them faint on hearing the death of a loved one, or they may suddenly feel lightheaded when another person may feel lightheaded when a letter of dismissal has been handed over to them from a job. Like someone goes to work and a letter he receives, he opens it and it is his dismissal letter. The person may experience the same type of shock. He may faint, he may become numb, he may become lightheaded, and so forth. So grief comes with shock. The person becomes shocked, disbelief. The second one is denial. Denial, according to Sigmund Freud, is one of the natural defense mechanisms. Denial. We all live in a world whereby denial plays a very big role. So when you first learn of a loss, it may be normal for you to think, this is not happening to me. This is not happening to me. You may feel shocked and numb. This is a temporary way to deal with the rush of overwhelming emotions. Like I said, it is a defense mechanism. And the manifestations are that, for example, if it is a loss through a breakup or divorce, an example is that the person may say, oh, they are just upset. They are not, they don't mean what they are doing. They are just upset. Like a girlfriend facing breakup from a partner who said, oh, Kojo is just upset. By tomorrow, he would have overcome his anger and everything will be fine. That is denial. You are denying the truth. You don't want to come to terms with the truth. A person who has lost his job may say, my employers are mistaken. By tomorrow, they will call me back. You see, denying the fact of the dismissal.
Yeah.
And then on the death of a loved one, the person may deny, for example, no, my darling is not gone. She'll come around the corner any second. He's not dead. That reminds me at a certain stage, when my mother died in my presence, when I put her in my car and we were going to the hospital, I was telling the person driving that, oh, she's not dead. She's not dead. I could hear her doing, Later on, I realized I didn't hear anything like that. You see? So you are in denial of the fact. You see? So on the death of a loved one, you say, oh, she's not dead. She will come back. You see? In the case of a terminal illness, the person receives a laboratory report or receives a doctor's report that states that his sickness is terminal and that he may die from it. So in denying it, the person may say, this isn't happening. It is not happening to me. The results are wrong. The person is denying the fact of what he is hearing. The next one is anger. You see, I want us to follow, it is a process. You get a shock, you come to denial, and then you get angry over it. As reality sets in, after denying the situation, then reality will set in. When reality sets in, the person will be faced with the pain of the loss. The person may feel frustrated and helpless. These feelings later turn into anger. The person may direct his anger toward other people or a higher power or life in general. To be angry with a loved one who died and left you alone is natural too. Your husband or wife dies and you become angry. Why didn't he stay and he's gone? For example, if it is about a breakup or a divorce, the angry survivor will say that, I hate him. I hate him. He will regret leaving me behind. When it is a job loss, the survivor will say, they are terrible bosses. They are not good bosses. My employers are very wicked. I hope that company fails. I hope that company sees nothing good. And when it is the death of a loved one, in anger, the survivor will say, I told her, if she had cared for herself more, this wouldn't have happened. Living with your partner and the partner dies. In your anger, you say, oh, she's gone. I told her, it's her fault. I told her not to eat this. I told her not to drink this. I told her not to go here. Now, look at it. She's dead. This wouldn't have happened. And a person receiving a report from the hospital that his sickness is terminal may say, if we had gone to the doctor sooner, see, if we had gone to the doctor sooner, this disease could have been stopped. So you get angry with yourself for not going to the doctor sooner than you went. The next stage is bargaining. Bargaining. During this stage of bereavement, the person dwells on what he could have done to prevent the loss. Common thoughts are, if only. These are the various terms that are used in bargaining. If only, or what if, you see, or the person may also try to strike a deal with a higher power, maybe with God.
Right.
For example, if it is a terminal illness diagnosis, the person may say, where is God in this? Where is God in this? How does God let this happen to me? You see? And if it is a breakup or divorce, the person may say, oh, if only I had spent more time with her, she would have stayed. So in this case, according to Freud, it is like projection of blame, projection. You've come to a stage that you don't want to ascribe the fault to you, but you are ascribing it to someone else. And if it is a job loss, the person will say, if only I had worked more weekends, they would have been very vulnerable, and they would have found out how vulnerable I am. And if it is the death of a loved one, the person will say, if only I had called her last night, she wouldn't be gone. If only I called her last night. Or if when they called me, I had responded, she wouldn't be gone. And if it's a terminal diagnosis, again, they can say, if I'd gone to the doctor sooner. The next stage is guilt and self-reproach. Guilt and self-reproach. And guilt and self-reproach, according to Kubler-Ross, is the commonest experiences of survivors. Guilt over not taking the person to the hospital sooner, etc. Usually, the guilt is manifest over something about that happened or something that was neglected around the time of the death. The guilt may be irrational. It is unnecessary to be guilty about it and will mitigate through reality testing. You have to test your realities. There may be a possibility of real guilt too. You may be guilty, really. You may be factually guilty, where the person has done something that might have caused the death, especially in SID, that is the syndrome of infant death. You see, infant death syndrome, whereby you wrongly fed your child with something, or you wrongly gave a medication. To a child or something. That one, you feel the guilt. You feel it, and that is a real guilt. Otherwise, the guilt that people experience as a result of a loss may be irrational. The next stage, which is the biggest stage, is depression. Depression. At this stage, I want everybody to remember that we are working through a process, and we have reached depression in the process. Sadness then sets in. You have gone through shock. You have gone through anger, denial, bargaining, guilt. Now, the reality faces you. Sadness sets in as you begin to understand the loss and its effect on your life. Signs of depression include crying, sleep issues, anxiety, fatigue, yearning. You yearn for that person, and decreased appetite. You may feel overwhelmed, regretful, and lonely. Feelings of loneliness frequently expressed by the survivors, particularly those who have lost a spouse and who were used to be very close on a daily basis, is very severe. A husband or a wife who comes from work, gives you a hug, kisses you, asks you questions, very pleasant questions, look forward to the next day with you. When that person goes, you feel very lonely.
Yeah.
And it is very difficult for the survivor. Even though very lonely, according to research, many widows will not go out because they feel safer in their homes. The intervention for loneliness is to move out and meet people. Exactly. But according to the research, widows who have lost partners refuse to go out because they don't feel safe. Psychologically, they don't feel safe. I feel so alone now, according to one widow who had been married to her husband who died for 32 years. It's been like the world has come to an end for me. She said 10 months after her husband's death, that's how she feels. The world has come to an end. She stays at home, maybe in her room, not wanting to go out. But we have two types of loneliness: emotional loneliness and social loneliness. These two are the two types of loneliness that can be defined as giving social support to help with social loneliness, but does not mitigate against emotional loneliness due to a broken attachment. As for social loneliness, you can mitigate against it with social attachment. You find new friends, you get to family, but emotional attachment, if it is there, you cannot get the support psychologically unless you seek treatment. So, for example, a person going through breakup or divorce may think of committing suicide, because what will be in her thought will be, why go on at all? Why go on at all? A person who has lost a job will say, I don't know how to go forward from here. And then a person who has lost a loved one will state something like, what am I without him or her? What am I without him or her? And then a person going through terminal illness diagnosis, yes, will state that my whole life has come to this terrible end. What are we saying? In depression, we are saying that in depression generally, we say that the person depressed has recognized the fact that he has hit a wall and there's no forward march for them. And that is why they commit suicide. In depression, everything these examples state are leading to suicide. So it's very important, and it happens some of the times. After depression, if the grief is resolved, then comes the last stage called acceptance. Acceptance. In acceptance, which is the final stage of grief, the person accepts the reality of the loss. And the person recognizes that the situation that has happened cannot be changed. Although they still feel sad, they are able to start moving forward with life. For example, a person who has gone through breakup or divorce may state that ultimately this was a healthy choice for me. A person who has lost a job will say, I'll be able to find a way forward from here and can start a new path. And a person who has lost a loved one may say, I'm so fortunate to have had so many wonderful years with him, and he will always be in my memories. And a person who has received a terminal illness diagnosis may say, I have the opportunity to tie things up and make sure I get to do what I want these final weeks and more. What we are saying over here is that with these stages of grief, the person is supposed to go through it smoothly, except that certain things happen that would disrupt the grieving process. If not, the person will reach the final stage and he would recognize that in the long run, a certain aim, a certain goal has been achieved. It's all right, it is ended, life starts again, and we move on. Then life continues. Otherwise, if the person does not recognize and accept the loss as it is, then the person has got a complicated grief. And he will live with an unresolved grief. When you are living with unresolved grief, an example of it is that somebody who has lost a loved one, and the person hears the news of an unrelated person, like a person she doesn't even know. Because of the loss that she faced and did not complete the process and did not resolve it, the person will grieve the loss of the unrelated person as if he or she is related to that person. I hope everybody is getting me.
Yes.
It can also happen that because of a certain loss in a certain area of life, the person becomes so vulnerable that he would not even want to attempt doing it. In my language, we used to state that this person, because her child drowned in the water, she has refused to drink water. You understand me?
Yes.
Somebody who has gone through the grieving stages of the loss of a loved one in marriage may decide not to marry again. May decide not to marry again. And that becomes a little bit complicated. I know very well an old lady whose son was jailed for something, was in prison. And the old lady grieved over this loss. She was all the time grieving, and she couldn't get the support to overcome the grief. And one time, somebody was reporting to her that thieves came to her store and stole some things there. This old lady wept as if the store belonged to her. Why? Because it triggered her grief of the loss of her son to the prison system. Now, let's look at the interventions we can give. When someone is going through grief, first of all, the professional must identify the person's current stage of grief, at which stage the person is at of grief the person has reached at the moment that he is seeing that person. Whose stage? Is it at the shock stage? That is very serious. If the person coming to therapy is at the shock stage, then the grief is severe, and that is complicated. If the person is at denial, yes, we all get to denial stages sometime, so it will be easy to resolve. But you see, it depends on the stage at which the person is. So it is good for the therapist to explore and identify the client's current stage of grief. Then the next thing the therapist will do is to encourage the client to tell the story of her loss. Talk about it. Communicating it to another person will help you get rid of the pain of loss. The third stage is the therapist will solicit grief-related pictures and mementos of that person's relationship. If it's your husband you lost, bring their wedding picture. A time they went with the children to the beach. A time they were dancing in church. A time something. Bring the mementos. Oh, this necklace. My husband gave it to me, and now he is gone. So let the person bring these mementos or pictures so that it reminds her of that person. And then after that, it will relieve her of the pain. The next thing the therapist does is to identify the client's dependency on the loved one. How much was the survivor dependent on the gone one? How much? You see, all these things we are talking about lead to fear, whereby the person becomes confused, angry, and irritable, because the person they were looking up to is gone. Is gone, and they have nothing to live for. Oh. The next stage will be to do an empty chair exercise with the client. Empty chair exercise. And this is how we do empty chair exercise. We do it by letting the survivor sit on one chair with another chair empty, and addressing the chair as if the lost partner is sitting in it. The empty chair exercise, like as if the partner is sitting in a chair, the survivor addresses him or her, and then pour out all her feelings, all her thoughts, all her emotions come out to the person who is gone. And another way to intervene, providing support to a grieving person, is to assign a grief letter. The therapist will give the client a homework to go and write a grief letter, pour out all her feelings, her grieving feelings on paper, as if he's writing a letter. Oh, Francis, your going has sent my world to an end. Your going has been very, very sorrowful to me. How am I going to deal with these children? How am I going to deal with myself? When you were alive, you were the one waking me up to prepare for work. Sometimes you prepare me breakfast in bed, and so on and so forth. These memories will help assuage the pain of grief. And then you also let the client list positive memories, good times they had with the lost person. And then finally, you should encourage the client to engage in spiritual activities, spiritual exercises from the church, from spiritual groups, from inspirational groups, so that they would look up to a higher power for support. Ladies and gentlemen, I told you I was coming to talk about grief and loss. I don't know if this is the part one. There were many other things I should have said, but time may be against us. So I will await your questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Attram. Wonderful people. So the moment is here. We have listened a lot to what Dr. Attram had to say on grief. And so we have the opportunity to put our questions across if we have any. Okay, Dr. Attram, so in your submission, you made mention that the one grieving should be allowed to undergo an empty chair exercise.
Yes, it's one of the interventions, yeah.
Okay, and so that it means that this person will have to pretend as though the lost person is around and he or she is pouring out her heart.
Yeah, I wouldn't use the word pretend. The client will visualize that the partner who is gone is sitting in that chair. And the therapist will supervise her to address the chair as if that person is sitting in it.
Okay, so that's a pretense anyway, because whether or not the person is no more, and so we are only assuming that the lost person is around.
No. This is a psychological work. It is a pure, it's a psychological work. If you pretend as if he's dead, we can always pretend as the person is in front of us in everyday life. You understand me? Right. This one, the person is made to think, it's like the person will be hallucinating. You see, it will be like the person views the chair to, it is an exercise. It is not just
something anybody at all can undertake.
Exactly. It is an exercise. It is like, for example, we also have a mirror exercise. You see, right. So the therapist will supervise over it and directing affairs. You see, affairs. So if we use the word pretend, it becomes something, something like a game. You see, right. We want it to enter into the person's thoughts. That one, if the person is gone, the person is gone. If we think the person is gone and is somewhere safe, yes, we think about it like that. This is a way like he will come again or we meet again. It is difficult to forget about somebody like that. Coordinator, what we are doing over here is trying to remove the pain of a person. You see, if you tell the client, pretend like your husband is sitting in this chair, it's like we are doing an ordinary exercise. You see, sometimes these empty chair exercises is followed by a lot of weeping. a lot of crying. Some people even yell. It's like the coffin in which the lost person was put in has been placed in front of you, and you are being asked to address the person inside the coffin. You see, so empty chair is more than just pretending.
Okay. Then comes my next question, which has to do with soliciting grief-related pictures or mementos to remind and then relieve the person.
Yes.
Don't we think that will be adding more injury to the pain the person has already by way of bringing all these things to bear?
Yes, ordinarily that is what we would think, but that is not it. Again, this is a psychological exercise. You bring the pictures for you to go through them, to forget about it. It is like a memorial. You see, it's like a memorial exercise. You are remembering the person. You are remembering the lost person. You are making sure that the client understands that this person once lived. This person was once my husband. This person once had sex with me. This person once kissed me. This person once held my hand. You understand me? These are the mementos that you are reminding the person. It's important. And again, coordinator, what happens in therapy is that when there is, for a successful therapy to go, we state that it is like a sore that has been covered. You see, a sore that has been covered. For you to heal that sore, you have to remove the covering. And it is very painful. It comes even with blood. It is very painful when you are removing the cover. But it is only in removing the cover that healing can take place. Just the same way.
Okay. So I would want to bring something in and ask another question. But if there are any from the audience, they can also, put their submission across. So we are actually, most of them is related to somebody losing a loved one. Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, per the questions that I am putting across and for what you have said, it looks like majority of the things are geared towards, grieving for a loved one or a lost one. So can we say that some of these remedies you have made mention of are quite in relation or can be likened to the fact that we organize these funerals or memorial services for a loved one who is dead and gone, just so we are able to come out of that? You cited okay, please go ahead and then I will come in with the other.
Yes, you may be right, you may be wrong, in the sense that at the memorial service and funerals, there are more than you, the grieving person there. You understand me?
Yes.
There are more people. And sometimes because of the crowd, you may not be able to resolve your grief adequately. You see, we are talking about a situation where the grief has become complicated and unresolving, and you are seeking support from therapy. You understand me? And it is between you and the therapist. Remember, during therapy, it goes through 6 stages. The first stage is creating a welcoming rapport with the client. This includes assuring the client that, one, it is very confidential, and that the client can tell you anything. I remember there was a time a client came to me and he was panicking, and can I help you? And he said, yes, I just killed my wife. I just killed my wife. This is a very difficult thing for someone to go through. But based on the principles of therapy, this person trusts and respects the therapist and will tell them. You see, and will tell them. And then from there, when the trust has been created, the therapist asks the client about the problem. How did the problem come about? He explores the problem and identifies it. Then he goes on to explore the goals and the identification of the goals, so that it goes like, so what do you expect therapy to do for you? So the person will come out to tell you a whole lot of things. It is a very personal encounter. You see, it is a very personal encounter. And during grief therapy, it is something that the innermost spirit of the human being comes out, unless, of course, he didn't love the loved one. You see, and through that, the therapist will come out with the interventions that are mentioned in the presentation. One of them or two of them will suffice, or all of them will be okay. And then he evaluates it, and then that is the end of the therapy. So during funerals and memorial services, it becomes a little bit complicated and difficult for bereaved persons to grieve properly. Even when they are at home, and they want to grieve their loss, visitors will be coming in. Visitors and family people will come in. They will not allow you to have that kind of serenity, you see, and the solitude to grieve. There are many, from the studies, we recognize that in many cultures, particularly ours in Ghana, we do not allow people to grieve their loved ones. As soon as a week passes, then we start doing a budget for the funeral. We start looking out for money to buy drinks, to do the funeral food, and so on and so forth. We do not allow the loved one. And for goodness sake, what we are talking about is somebody who has signed a contract in the presence of thousands of people, in the presence of God, that he is going to leave you until death do you part. You get a point now?
Yeah.
So now, you are, and when they are saying that, they do not know who will go first.
Exactly.
Now you are leaving the person unceremoniously. You understand me?
Yes.
Coordinator, I will tell you, many people find it difficult to come to terms with the loss of their loved ones. Even during divorce and separation, it's very difficult.
Yeah.
It's very difficult. I wrote a paper recently. It is about emotional attachment in relationships. You understand me? It is deeper than financial attachment. As for financial attachment, people can give money to take care of people, and if they go, they can go. But emotional attachment, it creates a lot of psychological implications. Yeah. So let's allow people to grieve.
Okay, so then it comes to the question of, you made mention one of the remedies is to assign a grief letter by way of asking the one grieving to, pour his or her heart out. And so what would the outcome be if, because this person is grieving so much, he or she is not able to even put words together, let alone,
a letter.
say what's there. Exactly. What would that be a failure? But you had already mentioned that there are other remedies, so it does not necessarily mean that all these remedies would work. But where this one, for instance, that does not work, how would you rate it then?
This letter.
Yes.
From experience, this letter works very perfectly. Very perfectly. And it works sometimes in very special occasions. Okay. You see, Paulina, let me tell you something. I don't think you have met, I may have to think whether you have met someone who has lost someone she really loves. Suddenly, you come home and the whole house is empty. Mm. You see his dresses, his shirts hanging on the closet. You see a special type of sugar he uses in the house, left unused. Mm. Mm. The person gets crazy. And the job of the therapist is to provide unconditional regard for this person so that this person will see that there's somebody who is empathetic towards her. Mm-hmm. In my culture here, instead of being empathetic, we are being sympathetic. Yeah. Sympathetic. Because no one feels it than the person who is encountering it. I am telling you the truth.
Yeah.
No one will feel your pain the way you would feel it. But there is somebody whose job is to feel the way you are feeling. Somebody has studied, gone through research, and is able to he says, I am walking in the same shoes with you. Mm-hmm. I am a fellow partner I'm a fellow traveler in your life journey. You get it? So yeah. When it comes to this letter we are talking about, the therapist is allowing the survivor to pour out her pain. To pour out her pain. And mind you, he won't write it on the spot. He will give it to her. She will give the topic to the client. She will go home and write the letter. Mm. You see, to write the letter and bring it to the next session. You get the point now. I, myself, have tried it on somebody in London. Somebody contacted me from London. I don't know if the person is on this platform listening. Somebody lost her mother. And because of that, she stopped going to work. And you know, outside there, you need to work to get money to pay your bills. Mm. She has stopped work, grieving all the time. Sometimes when I'm sleeping, I see my mother sleeping by me. Sometimes when I'm eating, I feel my mother is eating with me. Unfortunately, because of COVID, this person was not able to come to the funeral. So on phone, when I gave this assignment, she sent it through WhatsApp to me, you see, and it relieved her. It relieved her a lot, in addition to the other interventions. As I'm talking to you right now, right now, I'm sitting down here. I just received a message. My sister from Germany arrived this morning. I haven't seen her though, but my cousin tells me she has arrived. What is she coming to do? When our mother died a year ago, she was not here. Mm. So she has come here purposely. She has nothing to do here. All her children are with her in Germany. Mm-hmm. She has come here that she will be able to carry flowers to mother's grave. These significant things are very, very helpful in trying to let somebody overcome their pain. So don't fear. You're right. It will not increase your pain. Rather, it will reduce it.
Okay.
It is a psychological exercise. That's how I see it.
Wonderful people. This is the CS Show, a proud initiative by Prophetess Rhoda and the Visioneer of Manifestation of Holiness. We meet here Mondays through to Fridays for our morning raw. The time is 4 a.m. Ghana time. So wherever you are, you'd want to do the calculation to meet your location. And we also meet here Mondays, Thursdays, and Fridays for our Zion Hour and Time with the Word of God, respectively. and the time is 4 p.m. Ghana time. There are other activities that we also undertake here in Manifestation of Holiness. A link has been shared in the chat section. So if you want to be part of this wonderful family, you can simply click on the links and then you will join our Telegram platform. Our WhatsApp platform, unfortunately, is so full. We are taking steps to ensure that we widen our scope. Today, the topic we discussed was grief and loss, and with us to do this was Dr. John Attram, and he has taken us through a lot of reasons why we go through grief and some of the remedies that can be undertaken and by a specialist, so to speak. So if you are grieving, if you have any psychological issues, if you have any relationship issues, the best person I would want to recommend to you is Dr. Attram. He is always available to receive and help us go through our life journey as easy as possible. Dr. Attram, what would be your final words? I guess we might have to do a part two of this and probably add something more. But
Yeah.
before then, we would want to have your final words.
Yes. I have just a sentence to state, and it comes from Tolstoy, a philosopher, Tolstoy. Tolstoy states that only people, you see, I made reference to the fact that you might not have seen somebody who is genuinely affected by the loss of a loved one. Right. But in Tolstoy's words, and Tolstoy is a world-acclaimed old-time philosopher, he says that only people who are capable of loving strongly can also suffer great sorrow. But this same necessity of loving serves to counteract their grief and heals them. Only people who are capable of loving strongly. So that what he is trying to bring our minds to is that you cannot grieve genuinely if you never loved strongly. So people who are in relationships and they lose partners. I went to a funeral in Kumasi one time, and then a lady who was talking to me said that, you see this group of people in the same kind of cloth, we all belong to an association. We are all widows. Our husbands have died. And and what follows, I won't tell you because it was very disgusting. It was disgusting. He said, so as we are a group, we are still looking for young men to yes, that's what I didn't, and it is true. So such people, did they love their husbands? Even one stated that, and most of us, our husband died and left us a large estate. You see? So if you don't love strongly, you can hardly grieve sufficiently. So that is where I'm coming from. People who have loved, who have experienced love, who had depended on another person, when that person is gone, it becomes difficult for that person to move on. And it is in this situation that the therapist has a responsibility to assuage.
Wow. So I know I just asked you to give us your final words, but I was also pondering over something. So just like I said earlier, we have been talking about losing a loved one. And would we not say that someone would be exaggerating so much if, for instance, you got a gold watch that you had fallen in love with it so much only for, let's say, 24 hours, and you have come to love it so much, you lose it? Would you want to go through these whole processes to, make it up to the lost gold watch or something? Would you not be exaggerating?
Oh, that is why I said there are there are two types of pain, social and emotional. You understand me?
Right. Yes.
So this loss of watch may be a social situation that can be relieved by social interventions. You get a point now. That is what inspirational speakers will say, Fama Yami, this and so forth. I'm coming from a psychological point of view, where the person's emotions are concerned, the person's thoughts, the person's feelings are affected. You see, that one, when we're talking about depression in the stages, recognize that every example from that stage leads to suicide. And that is what we are more concerned about. I don't think the loss of wristwatch can lead to suicide, even though in some situations it can do. It can do. Yes, it can do. So maybe we'll talk more about it later on, but that is how it is. Yeah.
Okay, so we'll get to look at your schedule and see if in the coming weeks we can do a continuation. Right. So wonderful people. You have been amazing. You always make sure you are here for the CS show to be broadcast. We say thank you so much. We appreciate you. We have you in our hearts all too soon. We have come to today's episode of the CS show. The topic for discussion was grief.
So nobody asked a question.
Okay, then let me give the opportunity.
They hardly grieve.
Okay, so my audience, I don't know if anybody here has a question to ask. You would want to put it across right away, right?
So I know that like there are different ways that people of different ages like adjust to grief. So what's your take on like a situation whereby like a young person loses a parent that they were very close to, and because of that they fall prey to like peer influence at school just to fill in that like void of loss? How does such a young person deal with such a loss in order to avoid such influences?
Yes, when a young person loses a parent, it is more severe, even more severe than a person losing a spouse. This person needs intense therapy because this person may not necessarily go through all the 7 stages of grief. He may just jump into depression. The person may be shocked, but may not have the chance to be angry, may not have the chance to deny, may not have the chance to bargain, may not have the chance to feel guilty, but rather from shock, the person goes straight to depression. And after depression, the therapist is looking forward to the person accepting the situation so that he will overcome their grief. In the case of a child, the child may not even accept the loss, may not accept, he will continue to grieve. And we have different ways of resolving complicated grief and unresolved grief. You see, people like in the United States, when you ask a child, when a child is grieving, all they tell them is that, oh, your daddy, he's in heaven. You see, is in heaven. Remember, in the long run, the child will recognize that heaven is different from the type of place you are telling them daddy has gone to. And you will be increasing the child's pain if you just leave it at the person is in heaven. When the person is depressed, when the child is depressed, the therapist targets depression and provide the support that the child needs. It depends on how the child is feeling at that moment. In that case, we look at it from extremes, that from shock, the person goes to depression. Some children, like older children, like teenagers, may be angry, may feel some anger that they've lost a support system. and then come down to depression. But the bottom line is that the therapist would have to attend to the depression, most importantly, in grief for children. Otherwise, it will bring other behavioral problems like impulse control disorder. It can also bring anxiety disorder. It can also bring antisocial disorder. The child may become oppositional and defiant by the loss of the parent. As a result of that, the depression support must be very intense. Again, there's also other supports that the therapist can refer the child to. There are group therapies. There are many group therapies abroad. I don't see them here. There are group therapies, and we have grieving children group, where the child can be referred to go and meet other children who are also grieving as he is grieving.
Wow.
Please, have you got the answer?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you.
Yes. The Lord make his face shine on you and be gracious to you. Amen.
Amen. Amen. I don't know if there is any more questions. Okay, so somebody just posted something in the chat section. Let me read it quickly, and then we see what we can do. Please, I know someone whose girlfriend broke up with him and led him to be mad. He keeps calling the lady's name and he was taken to hospital. Well, I think that this is a contribution to probably what Dr. Attram was.
Yeah, and I agree with the person. Like I just said, if the depression is not resolved, it will lead to so many other psychological situations. This time, this person is suffering from obsessive compulsive disorder, OCD. You see, if you've lost a girlfriend and you keep calling her and so forth, then it is a disorder.
Yeah.
It is a disorder. Sometimes fear of not getting a replacement to that person, or fear of being treated the same way as this person treated you. That is what makes people get obsessed.
Okay. So at this point, at this juncture, I don't know if there are any more questions. Anybody with a concern? Anybody needs any support? You may want to put it across now. Okay, right. So we want to say once again, thank you so much, Dr. Attram, for always being there, responding to our call. We will put things in place to ensure you come again to continue where we ended today. Wonderful people, I want you to take very good care of yourselves. Next week, same time, we are coming here. I want you to take very good care of yourself and stay out of trouble. Mask up to prevent any coronavirus infections. Without wasting any much more time, it's bye-bye for now.